in the Realms of Mediumship by Chico Francisco Candido Xavier and inspired by the spirit Andre Luis. Chapter 6. Conscious Psychophony. The mediumistic meeting at the Spiritist Center was proceeding harmoniously. 3 spirit guards entered the room, escorting an unfortunate brother who was to receive the group's assistance. He was an unhappy, discarnate bachelor who had no idea of his present situation. Incapable of seeing his escorts, he walked like a deaf and blind person impelled by powers that he couldn't identify. This is an unfortunate obsessor whom they have just removed from the environment where he had been staying for a long time, said Alice compassionately. He disincarnated in his prime after wearing himself out on wild partying. Lethal toxification destroyed his body at a time when he did not have the least bit of preparation to understand the truths of the spirit. And like someone who had been informed beforehand regarding the particularities of the case, Alice continued. Observe, this is someone living in his own darkness. He has been brought to this room unaware of the route taken by his own feet, like any serious mental patient. After he left his garment of flesh, with his thoughts fixed on a passion for a woman, presently a tormented, very sick person who had tuned into him to the point of keeping him at her side amidst tears and afflictions, he began to vampirize her physical body. The loss of his physical vessel, while spiritually deficient, left him completely disoriented like a shipwrecked person in the middle of the night. However, he adapted himself to the physical body of the beloved woman, whom he began to obsess. He found her to be a new instrument of sensation by seeing through her eyes, hearing through her ears, often speaking through her mouth, and vitalizing himself with the ordinary food she ingests. They have lived for almost 5 years in this symbiosis, but the disturbed and undernourished woman has begun to display significant organic imbalances. Because she has requested our assistance, we have to perform a double rescue. In order for her to be cured of the phobias that presently assault her as reflections from his mind, which is terrified before the realities of the spirit, we have to remove the fluids that surround her. Just as a tree strangled by the embrace of the vine has to have them cleared away so that it can recover. Meanwhile, the spirit guards obeyed Clementino's orders and placed the sufferer next to Eugenia. The center's mentor approached her and applied magnetic energies over her cerebral cortex after projecting luminous rays over an extensive area of the glottis. We watched as Eugenia's spirit left her body, although she remained close to it at a distance of a few inches. Aided by the helpers, the visitor sat very close to Donna Eugenia, leaning over her, assuming the posture of someone bending over a windowsill. As I watched the scene, I recalled the way things work in the vegetable kingdom, wherein one plant develops at the cost of another, and I understood that that association could be compared to the subtle process of neuropsychic grafting. Sighs of relief came from the medium's chest. For a while, she had been somewhat agitated. I noticed that light, shiny threads linked Eugenia's forehead. She was now disengaged from her body to the communicating spirit's brain. Because I gave Alice a questioning look, he explained solicitously. This is conscious psychophony, that is, the work of a speaking medium. Although he has appropriated Eugenia's energies, the sickly guest from our plane remains under her control, connected to her magnetically through the nervous system, through which our sister will be informed of all the words he mentalizes and intends to say. In fact, he has temporarily taken possession of our sister's vocal cords and has appropriated her sensorial world. Hence, he can see, hear, and reason with a certain amount of equilibrium by using her energies. Eugenia, in turn, has firm control over the reins of her own will, acting as if she were a nurse playing along with the whims of a patient in order to help him. This whim, however, must be limited, because, aware of all the intentions of the unfortunate discarnate to whom she has lent her physical body, she reserves the right to correct any undesirable conduct he might display. Through the nervous system current, she will know his words as he forms them, discerning them beforehand because his mental impulses are reverberating in her thoughts like hammer blows. Thus, she can stop any abuse by monitoring his objectives and expressions, something she can do because he is a spirit who is morally beneath her in his present state of disturbance and suffering. Eugenia must not stoop to his level if she wants to be of any use to him. Every spirit in disturbance is mentally infirm and requires assistance. In charitable sessions such as this, the first assistant is the medium, but if the medium falls into the vibratory pattern of the one seeking his or her help, there is little hope for an effective assistance. Thus, when mediums are aware of their responsibilities, they have the duty to cooperate in preserving order and respectability in the task of assisting discarnates, allowing them free manifestation only to the point where the manifestation does not collide with the harmony required for the group and with the dignity of the premises. So, added Ilario, in this work, the medium is never very far away from his or her own body. That's right. Whenever the task involves disturbed spirits, the intermediary should not be too far away. With a deranged person in our home, being away from them is dangerous, but if they are looked after by conscientious friends, we can take a long trip because they will be safely guarded. In rendering assistance to disturbed spirits, our presence is logically imperative. He gazed at Eugenia, who remained alert and vigilant next to the spirit patient about to speak, and pointed out, if need be, our friend can return to her body instantly. They are both momentarily joined in a union in which the communicator represents the action, but the medium personifies the will. In all fields of work, it is natural for the superior to be responsible for the inferior. The visitor put his hand over his face in a gesture of relief and exclaimed in astonishment, I can see! But what sort of spell is tying me down? What chains hold me to this heavy object? And accenting his expression of surprise, he continued, what is the purpose of this gloomy, silent assembly? Who brought me here? We saw that, although outside her physical body, Eugenia heard all the words flowing from her mouth, temporarily being used by the pilgrim from the darkness, automatically storing them in her memory center. Upon making contact with the energy from the medium's nervous system, explained the assistant, the sufferer's senses have become revived, and that dazzles him. He is complaining about the chains that bind him, chains that are 50% the result of Eugenia's cautious containment. In this way, he behaves like a patient under control, which in this case is indispensable. What if our sister were to relax her authority? Ilario asked curiously. She wouldn't be in a condition to lend him any concrete benefit, because then she would have descended to the derangement of the beggar for light, whom we propose to help. With a happy image to illustrate the matter, Aulus added, a passive medium in such circumstances may be compared to a surgical operating table holding the patient in need of medical assistance. If there is a lack of firmness and humility, any intervention would be totally impossible. But does our friend consciously see the spirit now associated to her physical body as clearly as we do? I asked, attentive to my learning objectives. In Eugenia's case, that does not occur, because her efforts to protect her own energies, along with her interest in assisting to the best of her abilities, do not allow her the necessary mental concentration to see his outer form. However, his afflictions and pains are reproduced in her. She feels his pain and distress, registering both his suffering and his discomfort. While our conversation was broadening, the communicating spirit shouted, is this some sort of court? Why this strange reception when I'm the one who's being inconvenienced by being here? I am the Borio dos Santos, and no one offends me without paying for it. And as if his conscience were torturing him through inner creations not given to us to perceive, he yelled frantically, who's accusing me of having despoiled my mother and then leaving her? I'm not responsible for the hardships of others. Aren't I worse off than her? Ilario looked compassionately at the obsessor and asked respectfully, could his suffering be plain old mental anguish? Not quite, clarified Aulus. Mental crises of any degree affect us even in the vehicle of manifestation. The paraspiritual brain of our brother is delacerated, and the affliction that has invaded his fluidic body is as real as that of an incarnate person, suffering from an intracranial tumor. Displaying great interest in the study, Ilario pointed out, based on our desire for a greater understanding of spirit life, if we were incarnates at this meeting, could we submit him to a detailed questioning? Would he be able to identify himself fully well? Aulus shook his head slightly and said, in his present condition, such an undertaking wouldn't be viable. We are focusing only on an act of charity, but nonetheless, one of the highest significance for life itself. If we tried to question him, it would be fruitless. We would be addressing an alienated mind, which for some time to come will show damage in the critical centers of reasoning. He bears the legacy of an unbalanced existence, and is strongly attracted to the woman who loves him and whose relentless persecutor he has become. For the time being, he aspires to nothing but a parasitic life with her, nourishing himself on her energies. He has enfolded her in sickly spiritual fluids, and leans on her in the way a climbing vine spreads itself and proliferates on a fence. Adding to this the shock produced by death, we don't have the right to expect him to give us a satisfactory and complete personal identification. Meanwhile, the deranged Laborio continued. Who could stand a situation like this? Is someone hypnotizing me? Who's checking out my thoughts? What good is it to restore my sight if you tie down my arms? Observing him with fraternal sympathy, the assistant informed us. He's complaining about the control he is being submitted to by Eugenia's cautious will. Thinking about the questions that were burning in our souls, Ilario pondered. With the medium being conscious while she listens to the words of the spirit as he uses her vocal cords, is it possible that she might have some real doubts? Might not she be led to believe that the words she is saying are her own? Could she have some hesitations? That's possible. However, our sister can in fact tell that the turmoil and the words spoken at this time are not her own. But what if she did have doubts? Continued my colleague. Then she would emit from her own mind an explicit refusal, expelling the communicating spirit and putting an end to a precious opportunity for service. Doubt, in this case, would be a halting wave of negative forces. However, because Raul Silva had initiated the conversation with this rebellious guest, our guide invited us to observe the situation more closely.